two visits to two of Poland's key partners. France and Germany, together with Poland, belong to the Weimar Triangle, a trilateral cooperation format. The topics discussed in both countries included security, including that of the eastern flank and Russia's aggressive policy, as well as European Union policy, including issues on which Poland does not agree, such as the Mercosur Agreement, the Green Deal and the Migration Pact. Another topic was bilateral relations. In Berlin, the Polish president met German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier and Chancellor Friedrich Merz. It is also an opportunity for the leaders to meet for the first time and get to know each other. During the election campaign, the Chancellor was quite sceptical about this candidate. But now he obviously has to change his attitude because Karol Nawrocki is Poland's incumbent president. I think Karol Nawrocki also wants to get to know these two German leaders personally because he has an agenda that includes German issues. Among the German issues that the president spoke about during the election campaign is the issue of reparations. This difficult topic in Polish-German relations was also discussed during today's visit to Berlin. The matter is very delicate, but President Nawrocki put it at the top of his agenda during the election campaign, and of course, he has to talk about it, knowing that the German side responded to our note very succinctly at the time, saying that the matter is legally closed, which is not true. Polish President Karol Nawrocki travelled straight from Berlin to Paris for a meeting with Emmanuel Macron, President of France. Paris is the sixth capital that Karol Nawrocki has visited as President of the Republic of Poland. President Nawrocki has a chance to show in the most important European capitals, Berlin and Paris, that he intends to pursue an active foreign policy, that he will not be a figurehead president, but also that he will not focus solely on the United States. On the contrary, he intends to engage in tough talks with European players. It is also an opportunity to build alliances with European leaders on issues important to Poland and Europe. In the case of France, it is not only the most important country in terms of military potential in Europe, but it is also a country which, apart from Poland, is key in the attempt to build, however difficult it may be, a minority coalition to block the agreement with Mercosur. France already supports Poland in military matters after Russian drones violated our airspace. Rafale fighter jets flew in from France to defend Poland's skies.
The Rzeczpospolita daily newspaper reports new information on the destroyed house in Wyryki, in the Lublin region of Poland. According to the findings of the Rzeczpospolita daily newspaper, based on information from key state structures responsible for national security, a missile from a Polish F-16 fighter jet used to shoot down a drone fell on the house. The house was destroyed on Wednesday morning. According to initial reports, a Russian drone fell on the building in Wyryki, piercing the roof and ceiling. Now, new reports shed completely new light on the matter. Most likely, this missile flew through the building. At this point, it is difficult to say specifically whether it was a fragment of the missile, which is unlikely, or the entire missile, which is more likely, given that there was no explosion and the missile flew in the same form in which it detached from the aircraft that carried it to a certain altitude. According to reports, a 3-meter-long missile weighing 150 kilograms crashed into the house. However, the prosecutor's office is issuing laconic statements. At this point, I cannot say with certainty what fell on the house in Wyryki. It is the subject of an investigation, and we are awaiting the opinion of experts. After being shot down, every military aircraft has devices that record the results of the impact, the results of the launch, whether it is a cannon or a missile. Therefore, I see no problem in determining whether and where the missile hit. The Polish Ministry of National Defense is also silent on this matter. However, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and Minister of National Defense Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz issued a joint statement on the Iron Defender 25 military exercises, which began today in Ustka. These exercises, like the entire North Atlantic Treaty, are defensive in nature and are a response to aggressive maneuvers on the other side of the border. Today marks a milestone in the operational integration of additional equipment, including HIMARS and Chunmu launchers, which will soon be fully operational with the Polish Armed Forces, not just owned, but also operated by the Polish Armed Forces, and the integration of the air defense system, which is one of the largest investments investments in the history of the Polish armed forces. According to a source speaking to Rzeczpospolita, a Polish F-16 missile struck the building in Wyryki. This was because the guidance system malfunctioned. It was an air-to-air missile from our F-16, which had a malfunction in its guidance system during flight and did not work. Fortunately, it did not arm itself and did not explode because the fuse safety mechanisms worked. There was a Russian air raid, and the Polish side defended itself. Everything is coming together. The war news portal reports that a fragment of a Polish missile manufactured in the U.S. with clear markings has been found in the vicinity of Wyryki. On the very first day, the first photos showing fragments of these missiles in Wyryki appeared, but we were undoubtedly unsure because we did not have information directly from the Ministry of National Defense about what had hit the building in Wyryki. As soon as Russian drones appeared in Polish airspace, Polish and Allied fighter jets were immediately scrambled. The F-16's onboard radar operates in Doppler mode. It can detect low-speed targets such as drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, and helicopters, although these are more difficult to distinguish against the ground. Some of the drones were shot down, as reported by the Polish Armed Forces Operational Command. The day after the Russian air raid, we asked Deputy Minister of National Defense, Cezary Tomczyk, about the matter. 3 hits are certain. The 4th is probable. But I also spoke today with the pilots who fought over Poland today. A 5th and 6th hit are also probable, but not a hit, rather the neutralization of the drone using other methods known to pilots. Russian drones violating Polish airspace are not the only dangerous incident in recent days. Yesterday evening, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk reported a drone flying over government buildings and the Belvedere Palace in the capital of Warsaw, where the presidential couple resides. A Ukrainian citizen and a Belarusian citizen have been detained. The police are continuing their investigation, and this incident will be clarified in every detail in order to rule out all possible interpretations and to find out the truth about what was the source of this unintentional or deliberate provocation using a drone over government and presidential buildings. Of course it could be a provocation, absolutely, but it could also be a stupid prank, and since as far as we know, it was done by citizens of Belarus and Ukraine, it will fuel conspiracy theories even more. Only time will tell. However, this is another example of how national security is threatened. Our security is dramatically flawed, and the fault lies simply with the representatives of the administration who do not care about this security. It is not a question of us as a country not being ready, but of those responsible who do not care about the situation. According to a poll conducted by the Polster Research Institute for Super Express, more than half of Poles fear the outbreak of war in our country. What game is Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk's government playing by not informing Poles, and above all, by not cooperating with Polish President Karol Nawrocki? The previous optimistic news about the excellent cooperation between the Prime Minister and the President has been buried. And what is at stake in the government's communication is the safety of all citizens.
Donald Trump has a new plan to stop Russia's expansionist foreign policy. It is a geopolitical puzzle involving major players: the United States, China, the European Union, Russia, and even Ukraine. The American president wants the European Union to prove that it intends seriously to pursue peace. There will be an attempt to impose sanctions or put more aggressive pressure on Russia. But for the sanctions to make sense, there must be a willingness on the part of the West to impose real, serious costs on Russia in a coordinated manner. This raises several tasks, especially for left-wing establishment politicians in Western Europe. But, as political go right, the US administration has also approached Slovakia and Hungary. The aim is to immediately stop buying Russian raw materials, impose severe and effective sanctions on the Russian Federation, and impose tariffs of between 50 and 100% on trade with China, which supports the Kremlin consistently, but behind the scenes.
We're going to see, but we've hit them very hard in so many other ways. I don't know if you know. Do you know what they're paying right now? What are they paying right now? You know what China is paying right now in tariffs?
But to stop the Russian war machine, the wills of Berlin, Paris and Brussels are needed, not just in words, but also in deeds. It is a good proposal, if questionably realistic, but the mere imposition of tariffs by the United States on China, a country that buys a lot of oil from the Russian Federation, could be ineffective. Hence the idea for coordinated action by the United States plus the European Union, plus some other friendly countries like Japan and Australia. Such pressure would make sense, and I think that is what President Trump is aiming for. The problem is that left-wing establishment politicians did not understand where their close contacts with the Kremlin would lead them. They did not learn from their relations with Russia. And what is more, they would, given the opportunity, gladly return to them at the expense of building security based on an alliance with the United States. Polish President Karol Nawrocki, along with Donald Trump, understand these threats perfectly well. Both presidents are well aware that any cooperation with countries supporting the Kremlin, any postponement of sanctions against Moscow, and any purchase of Russian raw materials only fuels Putin's war machine, as the Polish president pointed out in an interview with the German daily Bild. We have zero Russian gas in Poland, and we are very proud of that. I believe that all countries that want peace and freedom should stop subsidizing the Russian Federation. We should not make the mistake that Europe made with Nord Stream 2, because unfortunately it ended in war. What's more, in the face of the Belarusian military maneuvers, entitled Zapad, Poland closed all its borders with Belarus, including railway crossings. This means a blockade of the so-called New Silk Road. Beijing transports its goods to Western Europe by rail, through Belarus and the border with Poland. This is an alternative to expensive air cargo or lengthy sea transport. The fact that China has been trying to make Belarus a gateway for its expansion into the European Union shows how important it is for China to restore Belarusian-Polish rail connections, and this pressure is evident. The Chinese foreign minister visited Poland and met both the head of Polish diplomacy, Radosław Sikorski, and President Karol Nawrocki. The conversation concerned not just bilateral issues including Polish-Chinese economic relations, but also the international situation. The situation surrounding the Russian drone provocation we witnessed on the 10th of September, as well as the security situation in Central Europe in the context of Belarus and Russia's aggressive policy towards Ukraine. On Friday, Donald Trump will speak by phone with Chinese leader Xi Jinping to put further pressure on Beijing and Moscow.
Getting to this framework was made possible by President Trump and the high regard that President Trump has for party chair Xi. So when the leaders have mutual respect, then the delegations have mutual respect.
Donald Trump's goal is to stop Russian imperialism and Chinese expansion. Europe has a great opportunity to join this international game for influence and money, but above all, for security. The rivalry between the West and China is not just a matter of US tariffs and economic dominance. It is an active phase of a continuing de facto war in virtually every aspect of life, including security. As analysts argue, where Beijing cannot dominate thanks to cheap labor and competitive prices, hostile takeovers or buyouts occur because China will spare no money to get a leg up. This is an American show of force with a range of 2,500 kilometers. A few days ago, it appeared on Japanese training grounds as part of the Dragon maneuvers conducted by the United States in support of its allies in the Pacific. Typhoon launchers armed with Tomahawk missiles can freely strike targets on the Chinese coast. This obviously did not please Beijing because it is an argument to which China has no answer. The deployment of the Typhoon missile system in Japan further undermines the legitimate security interests of other countries and poses a serious threat to the regional strategic security. Military rivalry is not only problematic for Beijing in the Pacific region, it is impossible to build military capabilities quietly. However, the technological advantage that the Chinese are exploiting around the world is another matter.
You get paid to borrow hundreds of millions, billions.
As revealed by Declan Ganley, an Irish military telecommunications magnate, the West is losing the technological war with China by a large margin. In the latest episode of one of the most popular podcasts in the United Kingdom, he pointed out a whole series of holes in security systems, from electronic equipment to international flights over Chinese territory.
You spend hours flying over China, and everybody has their aircraft Wi-Fi turned on. But what they don't realize is, and in fairness to the Wi-Fi providers, it says this is an unsecure connection, da, 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 da. When you're flying over China, all your emails, your WhatsApps, your everything are going up from that satellite terminal on the aircraft to a satellite, a commercial satellite, that's not the Internet, is being landed in a Chinese ground gateway, and everything is being intercepted.
The same applies to Chinese-made electronic equipment. This doesn't just apply to smartphones, the sale of which has been partially banned in the United States, but also computers, car radios, and even televisions. That is why Ganley himself is working on building the Outer Net, which is supposed to be a new secure internet resistant to hacker attacks or cutting of cables running along the ocean floor. It is supposed to be a cable-free internet based solely on satellites.
At 1,050 kilometers altitude.
The Outer Net has no gateways. It does not touch the ground. You go from the terminal up to the Outer Net. You stay on the Outer Net. You get routed around the planet to the end destination, and you get landed. You do not touch the internet at all. And that is unique. But it also makes it the fastest in the world, the lowest latency in the world, and very importantly, it has the tiniest attack surface of any global cyber attack surface of any global communications network, because you can't cyber attack something if you haven't got a connection to it.
Offer services previously.
The problem is that the Chinese are monitoring the market. They know perfectly well who is building or planning to build what, and what could harm Beijing's interests. According to Ganley, one of the entities working in Germany on the Outer Net concept was subject to a hostile takeover by a Chinese-owned company. And this was certainly no coincidence.